I never meant to end up in Hollow Creek. It was not on my map, and it was not on my mind. The last place I remembered with any clarity was the highway exit for Knoxville, where my GPS abruptly failed. My phone screen turned black and refused to turn back on. I had been driving alone for over 12 hours, and my eyes burned from the monotony of trees flashing past. By the time the first wooden sign appeared out of the mist, it was nearly dark. The letters were faded, but I could still make out the name Hollow Creek painted in flaking white. Below the name, someone had scratched through the wood in deep, ragged grooves as if they were trying to erase the words forever. The town itself was quiet to the point of unnatural. The road narrowed into cracked asphalt, lined with houses that seemed to lean in toward me. Every window I passed was lit from the inside, but I saw no movement, no sign of life. A single street lamp flickered near what might have once been a general store. Its windows were painted over with something black and sticky. The smell of damp rot seeped through the vents of my car. My gut told me to turn around, but the road behind me had already vanished into a low wall of fog. I stopped at what looked like a small motel, though the sign was hanging from one chain. A man stood at the front door, motionless, wearing a pale blue suit, far too clean for the surroundings. His face was long and pale, his lips thin and still. His eyes tracked me in a slow, deliberate way that made me feel as though he was not seeing my face, but rather something behind my skin. I asked if there was a room for the night. He nodded once and stepped aside. The air inside was heavy with the scent of wet soil. The lobby lights hummed in a low pitch that made my teeth ache. He handed me a metal key attached to a tag with the number 7 scratched into it. His voice was almost a whisper when he told me the hallway was to my left. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, each door identical except for the fact that they all had scratches running vertically down their centers. Room 7 was near the end. Inside there was only a bed and a single chair facing the window. On the chair sat a woman with her back to me. Her hair was long and dark, falling over a white dress that looked damp. She did not turn when I stepped inside. I froze in the doorway. The woman spoke my name in a voice that was both entirely unfamiliar, and yet exactly how I imagined my voice would sound if I were dead. My first instinct was to run, but when I turned, the hallway was gone. There was only a narrow tunnel sloping downward into complete darkness. The woman stood now, still facing away, and walked into that tunnel without a sound. My key slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. When I looked down, there were no numbers on the tag anymore, only a carved spiral that seemed to pull my vision into its center. From somewhere deep inside the tunnel, I heard my own voice again. This time it was screaming. I picked up the key without meaning to. My hand moved, as if it no longer belonged to me, the cold metal sending a vibration through my arm and into my chest. The carved spiral on the tag seemed deeper now, like it was drilled straight through the metal. The tunnel smelled like wet stone and rust. I could hear my footsteps, and yet they felt too light, as if the floor was not entirely solid. The further I went, the more I felt that the walls were narrowing, pressing in toward me with slow and deliberate intent. The woman was nowhere to be seen, but her presence was ahead, like a cold current in the air. Every so often I would catch a faint sound, not quite words, not quite breathing. I reached out to touch the wall, and my fingers sank into something soft. It felt warm. I jerked my hand back and found a smudge of red on my skin. My pulse quickened, but I kept moving because there was no going back. The tunnel behind me had faded into pure black. After what felt like hours, I stepped into a cavern. The air was warmer here, damp and pulsing with a faint rhythmic vibration that I could feel in my teeth. Shapes moved in the shadows, slow and deliberate. I could not tell if they were human or not. In the center of the cavern was a pit, its edges lined with that same spiral pattern as on my key. The pattern was carved into the stone so deep that I could see shadows in the grooves. The pit itself was filled with dark water that did not reflect light. From somewhere above, a thin rope ladder dropped down and brushed the surface of the water without making a ripple. I had the sense that someone ordered me to climb. I told myself to turn around, to find another way out, but then I heard my own voice again. It was not an echo. It was speaking from the pit. It said my name twice, then whispered something I could not understand. I stepped closer to the edge. The water began to shift, the spirals in the stone seeming to move along with it. I was leaning over the pit when a pale hand shot out of the water and grabbed my wrist. Its grip was ice cold, but beneath the cold was a strange pulse, like a second heartbeat trying to match my own. The hand pulled once, sharply, and I lost my footing. As I fell toward the water, I caught one final glimpse of the cavern and saw the man in the pale blue suit watching from the shadows. He did not move to stop me. He simply raised one finger to his lips. Then the water swallowed me whole. The water was colder than death. It filled my mouth before I could close it and surged into my lungs. My body convulsed, but there was no up or down anymore, only the crushing weight pressing in from every direction. Something was moving beneath me. Not a current, but a deliberate motion, circling, measuring. I tried to kick free, but my legs would not respond. A numb heaviness was spreading from the wrist where the pale hand had touched me. Then I saw light, not the kind that comes from the surface, but a thin line of white far below, as if the water ended in a slit in the world. The pull toward it was immediate and irresistible. I sank. The pressure built until I thought my skull would crack. My vision narrowed, dark at the edges, until only that line of light remained. It widened into an opening, and I was pulled through. I landed hard on wet stone. My lungs convulsed and spat out water that was thicker than any I had ever felt, as if it carried silt and ash in it. The air here was heavy and warm. I was in a tunnel again, but this one was made of smooth black stone that glistened faintly as if it were alive. The walls pulsed with a faint, irregular beat. Ahead, the tunnel widened into a chamber lit by a deep red glow. I could not see the source at first. The floor was covered in shallow water, reflecting the glow in jagged patterns across the walls. In the center of the chamber stood the woman in the white dress. The fabric clung to her, as if she had just risen from the same water that had dragged me here. Her back was to me again. When she turned, I almost did not recognize her face, not because it was strange, but because it was my own. Every detail was exact, down to the scar above my eyebrow. Her eyes, however, were entirely black. She spoke without opening her mouth. The sound vibrated in my skull and chest. She said I had crossed the first gate. She said there were 9 more. I asked her what was beyond them. She smiled in a way that did not fit my face. She said the gates were not to lead anywhere. They were to strip away. Something moved in the shadows behind, hurtle, jointed, with limbs too long to belong to any human. The red light flared, and I saw that there were others, dozens of them, lining the walls like sentinels. Their heads were smooth and featureless, except for the spirals carved deep where their faces should have been. One stepped forward, the water rippling around its legs. It carried something in its hands, a mask made of the same black stone as the walls, carved with the spiral symbol. The woman, my other self, said I would need it to pass through the second gate. She held it out toward me. I refused to take it. She tilted her head, and the black-eyed sentinels moved closer, their spirals beginning to glow. The glow matched the pulse in the walls, and I realized with sick certainty that it also matched the pulse now beating in my wrist. The mask was pressed into my hands before I could resist. The stone was warm. Too warm. Then the sentinels knelt, all at once, as if some unseen presence had entered the chamber. The woman stepped aside, and from the darkness behind her, something vast began to emerge. It came forward slowly, not because it moved with care, but because there was simply too much of it to fit all at once into my vision. The red light in the chamber dimmed, as if retreating from its arrival. The first thing I saw was an arm, or what I thought was an arm, long and jointed in ways that suggested it had been broken and reassembled without any regard for human anatomy. The joints bent both ways. The surface was smooth like metal, but flexed like skin. The mask in my hands grew hotter. My fingers ached, but I could not drop it. The spiral carved into the front seemed deeper now, like it wanted to draw my eyes into it until nothing else existed. When the creature's head, or the part of it that passed for a head, merged from the darkness, I understood why the sentinels had no faces. This thing had them all. Dozens of human faces stretched across its surface like masks, their mouths frozen open in silent screams. Some were fresh, others dry and cracking, and some were nothing more than impressions in the skin, as if the features had been absorbed. It stopped in front of me. All those stolen faces turned toward me in unison. None of the mouths moved, but the sound that filled the chamber came from deep inside the creature, low and resonant, like something massive turning beneath the earth. The woman, my other self, spoke again, inside my head. She said it was the Watcher. She said it saw through all who wore the mask, and that once I put it on, it would see through me. I said nothing. I could feel my pulse in my skull now, matching the rhythm in the walls and the spirals. The sentinels shifted in the water, surrounding me. The Watcher lowered one of its arms until the end hovered just above my head. The skin metal surface split open along its length, revealing rows of thin black threads that hung down and brushed my shoulders. The threads moved on their own, curling gently as if tasting the air. The woman's voice grew sharper. She said, if I did not put on the mask, the Watcher would take my face and leave me faceless among the sentinels. The heat in the mask was unbearable now, but instead of burning me, it sank deeper, as if the warmth was spreading through my bones. My hands rose toward my face without my permission. The threads touched my skin. The sensation was wrong, like a memory being pulled out through my pores. Images flashed in my mind, places I had never been, faces I did not know, moments that could not have belonged to me. I pressed the mask to my face. It sealed there instantly. The stones softened against my skin, molding to every contour. My vision went black, and yet I could see everything. I saw the chamber from above, from the shadows, from the surface of the dark water. I saw through the eyes of the sentinels, through the stolen faces on the Watcher, through the woman who wore my own face, and I saw another gate. It was not ahead of me. It was behind my own eyes. The Watcher stepped aside. The woman said I was ready. The sentinels parted, revealing a narrow archway carved into the far wall. Beyond it was only darkness, but the darkness felt alive, like it was listening. I stepped toward it. As I passed under the arch, the mask whispered something directly into my skull. It said the second gate would not open from the outside. It would have to be opened from within. The darkness beyond the archway swallowed me whole. There was no floor, no air, and yet I was still moving forward. My steps made no sound, but I could feel something shifting beneath me, like walking across the backs of things that refused to be still. The mask had no eye holes, yet my vision was sharper than it had ever been. I saw not with my eyes, but with whatever now lived where my face used to be. Every shape in the dark glowed faintly red, like embers barely holding on to their heat. Some of them were human. They knelt along the path, their bodies thin and trembling. Their faces were gone, replaced by smooth, pale skin. They swayed gently as I passed, like reeds in a wind I could not feel. None of them made a sound. The woman's voice came again, but it was closer now, inside my ear. She told me I was walking inside myself, that the second gate was not a place but a wound. She said all wounds eventually opened. I felt something in my chest now, deeper, somewhere behind my heart pulling. The spirals carved into the mask began to spin, not in the stone, but inside my skull. My breath quickened, and my pulse stuttered in strange rhythms that did not feel like my own. The kneeling figures began to lift their heads. Where their faces should have been, I saw the gate, a circular seam in the flesh, trembling, straining to open. The closer I walked, the more I realized they were all versions of me. Different clothes, different ages, but the same shape of shoulders, the same scar on the left wrist, the same way the hands curled when still. I reached the last figure. It was me, as I had been the morning before all of this began. Same expression, same posture. The seam in its face was opening now, not tearing but unfolding, like the petals of some obscene flower. Inside was nothing but a hole. The pull in my chest grew unbearable. My body leaned forward without my consent. I could feel something on the other side of that hole, pressing against it like a fist, trying to punch through a membrane. The woman's voice became urgent. She said once it came through, I would no longer belong to myself. My legs locked in place, but my upper body kept moving toward the hole. I smelled earth and iron and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. The seam was wide now, wide enough for something to push through. I saw a fingertip emerge from the darkness inside the hole. It was mine, my skin, my nail, but the movement was wrong, jerky, twitching, like a puppet with tangled strings. The fingertip became a hand. The hand reached for my throat, and then I realized I was not looking at it from the outside. I was looking at it from inside the hole. The moment I realized I was looking out from inside the hole, my body, my real body, was no longer mine. I could feel the air on skin that was not skin, the weight of muscles that did not belong to me. The mask was still fused to my face, but now it was on the outside of something else, the other me. The one that had climbed out of the hole was moving in my place. I could feel its movements only as faint vibrations, like I was a passenger buried deep inside its bones. Its fingers flexed and cracked. Its head turned slowly, as if tasting the air. It did not look down at me. It did not need to. I was still inside it, pressed against the walls of its mind like an insect trapped in amber. The woman's voice had changed, no longer guiding. It was now speaking to the thing that wore me. She called it the hollow. She welcomed it. Through its eyes, I saw the kneeling figures sink lower, pressing their heads to the ground. The hollow walked among them with steady, deliberate steps. Each time it passed one, the seam in their faceless heads closed a little more, sealing them forever. I screamed, but there was no mouth here to shape the sound. The hollow paused in front of the archway I had entered through. Beyond it, the watcher was waiting. Its mass filled the passage, its stolen faces twitching, as if sniffing the air. The hollow raised my hands toward it, and I felt something leave me, a weight I had not noticed until it was gone. The watcher reached forward with its impossible arm. Instead of taking my face, it pressed one of the screaming masks from its own body against my chest. I felt it sink through skin, through bone, until it wrapped around the place behind my heart where the pull had begun. The hollow shuddered in pleasure. I realized then what was happening. The watcher was not here to claim me. It was here to anchor the thing inside me, to lock it in place so I could never get it out. The woman's voice came one last time. She said the second gate was open now. She said the third would not be found in the dark. It would be found in the waking world. The hollow turned toward the path that led upward, toward the surface I had not seen since the beginning. Each step took us closer to light, but I knew it would not be me seeing it. As the first pale glow of daylight touched its stolen eyes, it whispered not to me, but through me. It said the world would never know the difference. The light burned. At first, not my eyes, the hollow's eyes. I could feel the way they narrowed against the brightness, how the lids fluttered, adjusting. My own awareness cowered in the depths of its mind, somewhere far behind the sight. We were standing at the edge of the pine forest outside Everett, Washington. The air smelled sharp, with sap and damp earth. The road was only a few yards away. and I could hear the distant hum of passing cars. The hollow flexed my fingers. It rolled my shoulders as though testing the limits of its new shape. I could feel every movement, but could not stop a single one. It walked to the road and followed it toward town. The asphalt still glistened from an earlier rain, reflecting fractured light like shards of glass. People passed, glancing at us, smiling politely, nodding in the way strangers do. None of them noticed. None of them saw what was riding inside this skin. Inside my mind I shouted, clawed, pleaded, but all of it was swallowed by the walls of that inner prison. The hollow hummed softly under its breath. The sound was tuneless, but I recognized it. It was the exact rhythm of my heartbeat. We reached town, the grocery store, the coffee shop, the gas station with the buzzing neon sign, all familiar, all unchanged. Yet walking through them inside the hollow felt like drifting through a perfect replica built just for me. Every reflection in the windows showed my body, my face, but the eyes were wrong. They lingered too long on certain people, especially those who did not notice us. The hollows studied them with interest, as if measuring them for something. It led me into the hardware store on Main Street. The scent of cut wood and metal shavings filled my lungs. My old neighbor, Frank, stood behind the counter, flipping through a catalog. He looked up and smiled. "Afternoon," he said. The hollow returned the smile. It spoke with my voice, casual and warm. Frank did not flinch. The hollow bought a length of chain, a set of padlocks, and something small it kept hidden in the curl of my fist. The cashier rang it up without hesitation. The receipt crinkled as the hollow shoved it into my pocket. As we left, I caught sight of a child in the parking lot staring at us. She was no older than 8, wearing a yellow raincoat, holding a dripping ice cream cone. Her gaze was fixed on my face. Her lips moved, soundless, but I read them perfectly. "That is not you." The hollow stopped walking. It tilted my head slowly, studying the girl. My pulse hammered in my skull. I tried to scream at her to run. The hollow smiled wider than my mouth should have been able to stretch. Then it whispered something. I could not hear into the space between us. The girl dropped her ice cream. She turned and walked away, her steps mechanical, her eyes empty, and the hollow kept walking toward home. We reached my house just as the sun was beginning to fade, the last gold light stretching across the yard like molten wire. The hollow unlocked the door with my keys. Stepping into the quiet interior I had once called safe, it moved with certainty. Not like a trespasser, not like a guest, but like an architect returning to oversee the final stages of a design. From the grocery bag, it removed the chain, the padlocks, and that small, hidden item. It placed them neatly on the kitchen counter. I could finally see it gleaming silver, no bigger than my palm key made from something that was not metal. Its surface pulsed faintly, like it was drawing breath. The hollow carried everything down into the basement. The air grew colder with each step. The light bulb above the concrete floor swung gently, though there was no draft dot against the far wall. The hollow began, threading the chain through the exposed beams, tightening them with the precision of a craftsman. Each clink echoed in the confined space, building a rhythm that made my teeth ache. When the last link was fixed, the hollow locked it with one of the new padlocks, then another, then another. A narrow loop of chain space was left in the center, just wide enough for a human body. It placed the pulsing key on the floor inside that loop, and then it waited. We stayed there for hours. No phone, no sound, but my own slow breathing, which I realized was no longer entirely mine. The hollow was keeping my lungs moving. Just past midnight, the first noise came from upstairs, a slow, dragging shuffle, not footsteps, something heavier, sliding along the floorboards. The hollow straightened in my skin, its head tilted, as though listening for a cue. The sound grew nearer, descending the stairs. Then a figure appeared in the basement doorway. It was the girl from the parking lot, her yellow raincoat now stained with something black and thick. Her hair was wet, plastered to her cheeks. Her eyes were wrong, too wide, the whites almost glowing in the low light. She stepped inside the loop of chain without hesitation and knelt by the pulsing key. Her small fingers closed around it. The hollow spoke through my mouth, soft and reverent. The third gate opens. The girl turned the key in the air, though there was no lock visible. The space inside the chain shimmered like heat rising from asphalt, and from that shimmer, something began to press through, slick and boneless, yet undeniably alive. I understood then, the locks were not to keep something out, they were to keep it in, and the hollow had just invited it home. The thing inside the chain loop was not shaped like anything I had a name for. It shifted in and out of forms, a twisting column one moment, a sprawling lattice the next, like it was trying on different skins and discarding them as unworthy. The girl still held the key. Each time she twisted it in the air, the shimmer widened, and the creature's substance seeped further into the basement. The smell was overwhelming, wet copper and burnt feathers. The hollow never looked away from it. My body stood still, hands clasped in front of me, like a disciple awaiting benediction. When the creature finally stilled, it pressed something like a hand against the inside of the chain. The hollow stepped forward. My mouth opened, but the voice that came out was not even trying to sound human. "This one is ready." The creature's hand, or what passed for one, touched my chest. Heat spread through my ribs, then my spine, then my skull. Every muscle in my body locked at once. I felt the hollow withdrawing from me, not leaving, but making room. I thought I would collapse, but instead, my legs carried me up the stairs without my consent. The girl stayed behind, her gaze fixed on the creature. The basement door shut itself as I passed. Outside, Everett looked unchanged in the cold night air. Streetlights hummed. Cars moved along the main road. But the longer I stared, the more wrongness bled through. Across the street, an elderly man walked his dog. The animal stopped, sniffing the air, then began pulling hard on the leash. The man turned his head toward me, and my stomach tightened. It was not his head anymore. It was mine, my own face, looking back from his shoulders, the mouth smiling. Too wide, from the gas station parking lot, a teenage boy leaned against a car, drinking from a bottle. He turned at the same moment, and his face was mine too. The hollow inside me hummed, pleased. I understood now. This was not about replacing one person. It was about replicating an infection that wore faces instead of spreading sores. The further I walked, the more copies I saw. My own eyes stared from the windows of houses, from the seats of parked cars, from the faces of strangers who should not have known me. Each one moved in perfect sync with my steps. When I stopped, they stopped. When I tilted my head, they tilted. A web of mirrors laid across the entire town. Somewhere far behind my own vision, I could feel the third gate widening still. The hollow's work was not done, and for the first time, I realized the locks in the basement were not meant to hold the creature in or out. They were meant to hold me, so that when it finally stepped through, it would have somewhere to keep. The original dot. By the time I returned to my street, Everett had fallen silent. Not a single car moved. No wind, no insects, no distant hum of highway. It was the kind of silence that felt like the moment before a deep inhale in anticipation too heavy to break. Every house had its lights on. Behind every window, my face waited. Each expression was slightly different, some calm, some weeping, some grinning so wide the skin split at the corners, but all of them watching. The hollow guided me to my front porch. The door opened before I touched it. Inside, the air was colder than the night outside, heavy with that same smell of wet copper. The girl in the yellow coat was standing at the foot of the stairs. The key hung from her neck now, pulsing faintly against the dark stains on the fabric. She said nothing, only turned and walked down into the basement. I followed because my body had no other command to follow. The creature from the third gate filled the chain space completely now, though it was still shifting, still deciding on a final form. As I stepped closer, its surface rippled. A shape began to push forward through its skin. It was me, not another copy with empty eyes, not a distortion. Me, exactly, down to the half-healed scar on my right wrist. The creature pulled it forward until it stood in the center of the loop, dripping with something black and cold. The hollow inside me leaned toward it, eager. I felt my heart beat slow. The thing that looked like me stepped over the chain without resistance, and then it smiled. I understood the order of things in that moment. The copies outside were not for the creature. They were for the hollow. The original me was for the creature. The chain snapped open. The girl turned the key one final time, and the shimmer collapsed inward. I fell, not onto the basement floor, but into something without weight, without sound, without light. I could still feel my body, but it was pressed against itself, folded, in ways that left no space for breath. Above me, far away, I heard the basement door shut. Somewhere, my replacement was walking up the stairs, wearing my skin. I do not know how long I have been here. There is no time, only the pressure, only the sense of something vast, coiled just beyond touch. And every so often, when the stillness is almost too much to bear, I feel it lean close my exact face, whispering without breath, "You are the last. Original." It never says what will happen when there are no originals left. I think I already know.